Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Horror Mine, the home for all things horror. My name is Vic Shy, and this is the Scare Score, the show where I break down and discuss horror movies every week and rate them on how scary they are or attempt to be. This week, my friends, I'll be covering the 2017 Netflix original horror film, The Ritual. The film revolves around four friends that go on a hiking trip to Sweden after the tragic death of their friend. The last time I covered a film about a group of friends that traveled to Sweden, things went absolutely batshit crazy. I wonder how it'll go this time. My friends, The Ritual is hands down one of the best horror films on Netflix, and one of my all-time favorite horror movies. The film does an amazing job setting up its amazing story, characters, and really cool monster for one heck of a good time that took me completely by surprise. But how scary is it? Let's find out as we tally up the Scare Score. Our movie begins in a pub and we meet a group of friends, Luke, Hutch, Dom, Phil, and Robert. The friends are trying to decide the location of their next holiday trip, and Robert suggests a hiking trip to Sweden. On their way home, Luke wants to make a quick stop at the liquor store for a bottle of vodka and asks Robert to go along with him. Inside, they notice the store clerk bloodied and beat up behind the register. Two robbers wielding a metal pipe and a knife emerge from the back of the store, and Luke quickly hides behind one of the shelves. The robbers switch their attention to Robert and take his wallet and watch. We see Luke behind the shelf holding the vodka bottle as a possible weapon, but he never emerges to help out his friend. The robbers then ask Robert for his wedding ring, but he refuses to give it to them. Robert looks back at Luke, but Luke again does nothing. One of the robbers then loses his patience and strikes Robert in the head with the pipe. The very last thing Robert sees is Luke hiding behind the shelf, leaving him alone to die, before he is struck in the head once more, killing him. Luke wakes up inside of a tent as we find out that 6 months have passed and the lads are now in Sweden. We then get a shot of the group walking between the mountains as we are treated to the film's awesome soundtrack. They find an area on top of a hill and dedicate it as a memorial for their late friend Robert. They place Robert's picture as well as several mementos on a rock and say some parting words before making a toast from a flask. At night, Hutch has a talk with Luke where he tells him that Robert's death was not his fault. I don't really know about that one. The next day, Dom falls between a crack and injures his ankle, forcing him to walk with a rod. Luke and Hutch believe that Dom is overreacting and that his injury isn't as serious as he claims. Hutch suggests going southwest, cutting through the woods and the journey in half, as opposed to walking around the entire mountain. A decision that ultimately pays off as the entire group of friends make it through the woods, unscathed and without issues. Said no horror movie ever. At the entrance to the woods, they notice an old van that makes me think that Shaggy and the gang probably didn't make it out of this one. We are then treated to a beautifully eerie shot of the woods as well as the film's brilliant and ominous soundtrack. They then come across a large dead elk that's been gutted and left to hang in the trees. The first scare of the movie, although a simple jump scare, actually caught me totally off guard and scared the crap out of me. They try to figure out whether a human hunter or an animal could have done that, and Luke decides that he doesn't want to stick around long enough to find out. A huge storm brews as night falls, and they come across a tree that appears to have runic symbols carved into it. They then notice a cabin behind it and decide to take shelter for the night. Everyone retreats inside of the cabin except for Luke, who hears something inside of the woods. Inside the house, they notice the same runic letters they saw carved onto the trees, hanging from the ceiling. Phil goes to take a look upstairs and comes across a creepy looking totem with antlers for hands. The group is baffled by the discovery and Phil is determined that the totem is related to witchcraft. This scene has such a creepy and ominous feeling to it. It's just a small glimpse of the true horrors that the group will be facing and sets it up perfectly. They mosey their way into their sleeping bags and call it a night. As the storm rages on, we hear the sound of an unknown entity getting closer and closer to their cabin. Luke wakes up in the middle of the night and experiences something very strange. Lightning strikes and seemingly freezes in time and space, lighting up the entire cabin. Luke calls out to the lads, but none of them wake up. He opens the door to the outside and finds himself back inside of the liquor store from the beginning of the film. He suddenly wakes up in the middle of the woods, bleeding from his chest, as it appears to have been stabbed by claws. He looks up and sees trees rustling in the distance, as if something is running away. We then hear Hutch screaming from inside the cabin and find that he has woken up from a nightmare. A nightmare scary enough that he pissed in his pants. Dom is in the corner of the room, completely terrified and crying for his wife Gail. Finally, Luke finds Phil in the upstairs room with the totem. He is completely naked on his knees and appears to be praying to it. Luke asks the question we are all wondering.
Phil, what are you doing?
What the hell are you doing, Phil? Phil wakes up from the stance and seems completely unaware of what he was doing. The entirety of this scene is ominous as hell and, quite frankly, pretty scary, as we have no idea what the hell might have caused all this to happen. As they leave the cabin, they see that several trees are now carved with the same runic letters, and Luke believes that this is a warning and they should go back the way they came. Hutch still insists on going southwest, but Dom notices a path in the middle of the forest and decides to take it as he is tired of going off path. Dom points out some tree stumps that appear to have been carved and believe that they are getting closer to civilization. After a few more steps, Dom says that his knee is killing him and that he needs a break. The group protests this as they all want to get the hell out of the woods as soon as possible. Luke decides to go look over the top of the ridge to see if he can spot anything. At the top of the ridge, he hears a noise and sees what appears to be a hand clutching a tree. He runs back to tell the group about what he saw, and Dom does not believe him. Dom says that he does not value Luke's judgment and that they wouldn't be here if it weren't for him. He brings up the fact that Robert was brutally murdered and Luke walked out of the liquor store without a drop of blood on him and calls him a coward.
You are not my fucking friend anymore. You are not my fucking friend anymore. I'm not. No, you're fucking not.
Luke then proceeds to punch Dom straight in the kisser and walks off.
Is that what you think? Hey? That it was my fault? That I should have stood up?
Well, actually, yes, Luke, it's what we all think, but then we wouldn't have this nice emotional redemption story arc now, would we? Phil notices an old tent partially buried in the ground, and they find the belongings of a camper who never made it out of the forest, severely lowering their morale in hopes of ever getting out alive. Come nightfall, we see that Dom's knee has gotten worse and that he is not exaggerating the pain. Sensing their impending doom, Hutch tells Luke that he should go and get help in the morning while the rest of the group stays behind. While getting ready to go to sleep, Luke hears heavy footsteps directly outside of his tent. He takes a peek outside of the tent and sees Robert with the robbers looking directly at him. The robber once again smacks Rob in the face and then looks at Luke, calling him a coward. He wakes up from his nightmare to see Phil screaming outside of his tent. Phil says that all he saw were shadows and that Hutch was taken. Suddenly, they hear Hutch cry out in agony in the distance. Luke immediately leads the group in search of Hutch. Dom tells him that they should not wander off aimlessly into the dark and should make their way back to the tents. In a tragic revelation, the group comes across Hutch's dead body, gutted and hung up in the trees in the same manner as the elk.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Phil believes that the creature purposely left Hutch where it knew they would find him. Luke takes Hutch's knife and compass and tells the remaining lads that they need a move. While trying to find their way out of the woods, we see a small glimpse of the creature stalking them from afar. We can see that the creature is able to perfectly blend into the woods and has been following them the entire time. Luke sees light between some of the trees and is able to see the end of the forest in the distance, showing that Hutch was right all along about traveling southwest out of the woods. He also notices several spots of light in the distance. Luke returns to find Phil looking around the trees with his flashlight. After Phil gets violently snatched away, Luke attempts to run away but lands face first into a tree. He then sees another vision inside of the liquor store, showing that he is battling more than just a creature in the woods. He notices Dom hiding at the base of a tree. Dom begins to cry and says that he does not want to die alone, but Luke reassures him that he is not going to leave him. Luke and Dom decide that it's now or never and make a run for it. They suddenly come across a path lit up by lanterns and find Phil's dead body impaled by tree branches. They make their way into a cabin and are suddenly knocked out. They wake up in restraints inside of a dark room as it appears they are now inside of a small village. Luke manages to make a peephole and sees that the villagers are building something out of wood. An old lady comes into the room and feeds Luke some water. She pulls down his shirt, revealing the injury to his chest, and we see that she is sporting the same injury that is now turned into a scar. She refuses to give Dom any water, and he is then taken away by two villagers. Dom can then be heard screaming in pain directly above. A young woman comes into the room and reveals that Dom is being prepped for a sacrifice. Dom's cries of agony are extremely terrifying to hear, especially since we don't see what's happening to him. This gives us a sense of hopelessness and uselessness, which is exactly what Luke must be feeling, not being able to help his friend. Dom returns to the room all bloodied and reveals to Luke the nightmare he had back in the cabin. He states that he envisioned the villagers offering him to the creature, and that the creature was gripping him. He then says he saw his wife Gail, which is why he was calling out to her. He tells Luke that he is going to die here, but that Luke needs to escape and burn the entire village to the ground.
And you tell my wife I tried to get back to her.
Dom gets taken to the middle of the village and tied to an offering pole. His wife suddenly emerges from the woods as he calls out to her. She claps his face between her hands and it is revealed that it is actually the creature itself gripping him, just like in his nightmare. The creature rips Dom from the pole and impales his body onto a tree, killing him. Inside of the locked room, Luke purposely breaks his thumb and gets one of his hands free from the restraints. The young woman comes into the room once again and pretty much explains everything that's going on, and really could have made this video instead of me. She explains that the creature of the forest is a Yoten, a Norse god and a bastard offspring of Loki. Loki and Frost Beast? That seems about right. Anyways, it's not mentioned in the movie as she says the villagers don't say its name, but in the book the film is based on, it is revealed that the Jotun's name is Moder and is a female. She tells Luke that they worship Moder in exchange for eternal life. We find out that Moder marks those who enter its forest, who suffer from great emotional pain, and kill those who do not. Those marked by Moder are then given the option to kneel before the god and live in the village or die by tree impalement. She says that the ritual will take place tonight, where Luke will be given the option to worship Moder or die. Luke finally manages to escape his binds and walks out of the room. We can hear a strange moaning-like chant coming from upstairs, and he decides to check it out. The chanting gets louder and louder as Luke approaches the door. However, when he opens it, it falls completely silent. He walks into the room and sees what appears to be dozens of mummified people. They all appear to be immobilized, but we see that they are actually still alive. It is then when we realize the eternal life that Moder promises doesn't stop one from aging and turning into essentially a living zombie. All that worship for that? Kinda sounds like a scam to me. Luke uses a torch to light the bodies on fire and puts them to rest. He walks out of the room and is caught red-handed by the elderly woman and hilariously knocks her out with one punch. He finds an old rifle with some ammo as Moder emerges from the forest, clearly not happy about the turn of events. Moder speaks to the young woman and then snatches her off the ground for her insolence. On his way out of the house, Luke shoots one of the villagers in his way. He points his weapon at another villager who drops his axe and gets on his knees. However, we see that he is actually cowering to Motor, who is standing right outside of the door and has killed the young woman. Luke manages to escape the house by bursting through a wall of flames and runs off. He sees Motor in its entirety in front of the burning building and decides to shoot at her from afar. This enrages the creature, which automatically gives chase to Luke. While in the forest, Luke finds himself partially inside of the liquor store, showing that Motor was the one playing with Luke's inner emotional struggle the entire film. Motor knocks Luke to the ground, and as he tries to get back up, forces him down into the ground. We see Motor attempting to beat Luke into submission and force him to worship her. Motor fully extends her body to prove that she is all-powerful. I just want to take the time and say that I absolutely love the creature design for Motor. It's completely unique, and I feel that it serves as the perfect villain for the movie. It wasn't just a generic movie monster that just aimlessly kills people for no reason. It's an all-powerful being that preys on the emotional pain of weary travelers and thrives on being worshipped. I love that we can only see and hear glimpses of its presence throughout the film until the final reveal at the end. They took the time to flesh out not only their human characters, but their monster as well, which I really appreciated. Luke then sees Robert laying on the ground and looking at him just as he did before his death. However, this time, instead of being idle, Luke grabs a hold of the Leviathan axe and manages to slash Motor in her face. Luke runs out of the woods as we see Motor is unable to give chase past the forest. In the film's brilliant final scene, Motor is roaring at Luke from inside the forest. Luke, having overcome all the odds in his internal struggles, emotionally roars back at Motor, victorious. As the sun rises, Luke gets farther and farther away from the forest as we see a car on a distant road as the movie ends. And that, my friends, was The Ritual. While honestly not very scary, I can say that this is one of the best horror films I have ever seen. The film is led by an incredible cast and chooses to focus on its character-driven story, which kept me hooked the entire time. Don't get me wrong, the film does a great job in capturing an absolutely creepy atmosphere through the use of cinematography, setting, and truly amazing sound design. The film also has a decent amount of scares spread throughout, and the final scare score for the film comes out to 50%. The film was all about Luke's internal struggle from his actions at the beginning of the movie. He was originally a complete coward that couldn't stand up to do what was right and ultimately got his friend killed. While on the journey through the woods, Luke was dealing with the emotional pain from what he had done, but this time did his best to make sure that all his friends left that forest alive, and that he did not repeat the same mistake. His character's journey was even harder as Motor stalked a group throughout the entire film, preying on his emotional pain and attempted to dismantle him physically and emotionally into submission. However, he overcame all of the odds and survived. His character arc was absolutely amazing from start to finish, and Luke is now one of my favorite horror film protagonists. I highly recommend fans of the horror genre to check out The Ritual, which has been one of the best horror films on Netflix from its release, and still is to this day. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have a specific horror movie you'd like to see me cover, let me know in the comments down below. My friends, I cannot wait to see y'all right back here in the Horror Mine. Y'all stick around.